Our adventure to Egypt took place in March of 2008. We flew out of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and had an 8-hour layover in Amsterdam before continuing on to Cairo. It was a long trip, and by the time we got our luggage and got out onto the van, it was 4:03 in the morning, Egypt time. So we went straight to our hotel. We stayed at the President Hotel, which was actually on the island of Zamalek in Cairo. Wow, what can I say about Cairo? It's a beautiful, interesting city with lots of buildings and architecture that is different from what we would see here in the United States. And the market's bright and colorful and lots of diversity. But the one thing that most of us will remember and associate with Cairo is the traffic and the street noise. This is what it sounded like and looked like almost anywhere we went in Cairo, even if it was at night. Our introduction to Egypt's ancient antiquities came at the National Museum located in Cairo. Here we learned some history and saw our first mummies, hieroglyphics, and some cool artifacts like the Rosetta Stone. But probably the coolest thing that I'll remember from the museum is the exhibit on King Tut. That was just amazing and really cool to see in person. Our first day trip out of Cairo was to the Step Pyramids, which were the first pyramids built in Egypt. And that was a good introduction to the larger pyramids in Giza, known as the Great Pyramids. But first we went to Memphis, the old capital of Egypt, and there was an open-air museum there that had the statue of Ramses II and an alabaster sphinx and an open courtyard with lots of cool sculptures. And finally, it was on to the Great Pyramids, which are located just outside of Giza. Our tour guide told us we would only have 10 minutes at the first pyramid. After some begging and pleading, we actually got it bumped up to a whole whopping 15. I think we all would have liked to have had more time there, but we had a really jam-packed schedule, and our tour guide did a nice job of trying to keep us on track. I knew the pyramids were gigantic, but until I was standing at the base and the block was almost as big as I was, and I peered up and all I could see was row after row after row of these blocks heading up into the endless sky. I just truly had no idea how truly magnificent and how huge they really were. Our tour guide didn't recommend us going into the pyramid, but some of us thought that we couldn't come all the way to Egypt, get this close, and not go in. So we did, some of us, get to go down into the second pyramid, and that was a pretty cool experience as well. We also had a tour of the Solar Boat Museum right next to the pyramid. First we had to put on these funky slippers to prevent tracking in pyramid dust. Then we could go into the museum to see the boat itself. And actually this was a really late discovery. It was just discovered in 1954. It was actually in a whole bunch of pieces and had to be reassembled like a jigsaw puzzle. When we were leaving, we saw our first Egyptian camel. Then it was off to the Sphinx, which we almost didn't see because it was closing and we just snuck in before they closed the gates. So again, this was kind of a rushed experience, but at least we got to see it. Then it was tea time at the Mena House, a famous restaurant that overlooks the pyramids and has a great view. It was a really good way to end a good experience. Seeing the pyramids, it really sunk in that we were in Egypt, and that was one of the highlights of my trip, seeing those pyramids. We flew to Abu Simbel, which is a beautiful temple in Upper Egypt, which is actually the southern part of Egypt because the Nile flows north. And an interesting fact about Abu Simbel is that the temples here had to be moved because Lake Nasser is a man-made lake, and the temples would have been lost to the lake if they had not been moved. So really interesting side to this particular temple. Since Abu Simbel is basically just the temples, we just visited them in the morning and then got back on the plane and flew to Aswan. And Aswan is the southernmost city of Egypt. It's a beautiful little town that also has a lot of Nubian influence, so that was kind of fun to have that cultural element. We stayed at the Cataract Hotel. The old Cataract Hotel is known for its famous visitors, including Agatha Christie, who stayed there and wrote some of her novels, including Death on the Nile. Cataracts are huge rocks that protrude out of the Nile and make the river impassable. We also went out to the High Dam in Aswan, which was just completed in 1971. This dam has created 30% more land that can be cultivated, and it also has created more rainfall in the area because of the evaporation from the water that is kept in Lake Nasser. The dam has doubled the country's power supply. The Soviet Union offered funds and expertise in the completion of this dam, and so on the eastern end you'll find a monument that is devoted to the friendship between the Soviet Union and Egypt. From Aswan, we took a boat out to the Temple of Philae. Philae is a temple that is devoted to the goddess Isis, and it's on an island, so you can only get there by boat. It's a beautiful temple that, again, had to be moved because of the water, so that just makes it even more remarkable. Here are just a few photos from the Temple of Philae. Outside of Aswan is a quarry where the unfinished obelisk lies. The obelisk is cut on 3 sides but still attached to the bedrock on the bottom. Historians believe the obelisk was abandoned because of a flaw in the stone. However, this also provided opportunities for historians to get an insight into ancient Egyptian stonework techniques. It was in Aswan where we boarded our cruise ship, the Mojito, which would be our home for the next 3 days as we cruised along the Nile. The MS Mojito was a 4-deck ship that was beautiful, and in the mornings we'd have animals made out of our towels. In the evenings there were music programs including a belly dancer and the whirling dervish. We still had a really strict and busy schedule to adhere to, but it was nice to be able to have a little bit of time to sit on deck and just look at the scenery as it passed by.